Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Dashboard Fridays. I'm Adam from Squared Up, and today I'm joined by Dan from our solutions team. Hey Dan,
Hey Adam, good to be here.
thank you very much for joining me today. We've got another Google Cloud Platform recording for you today. This one's focused on Google Compute Engine. So Dan, I'll bring up the dashboard, and why don't you just walk us through what this shows?
Absolutely.
Good to go.
Cool. So this is a Google Compute Engine dashboard. It's sort of a one that shows a lot of the default metrics, specifically technical ones, some cost ones that you might want to see if you have a Google Compute Engine environment. For all those that don't know, Google Compute Engine essentially is Google's sort of VM platform. You can deploy Windows and Linux VMs onto this with a whole bunch of sort of templated operating systems or just custom images you bring yourself, providing they work and are supported. So you can get a whole bunch of different use cases for this. You can see some in the top here. You can see a Jenkins one, but also it's quite common for people to deploy sort of their own applications, sort of customer level applications, that kind of thing. So it's quite important to see those levels of metrics. So just looking at this, just going down it. So at the top here, we've got our default sort of squared up health status. So this is quite a good example because it shows what it looks like if there's one that's sort of shut down or not working. You can see all the green ones would obviously be up and running and healthy. We've got a red one essentially for if it's either shut down or if there's any issues with things like disk on it, that kind of thing. General availability. And you can also set up monitors on this. So there's not one set up right now, but essentially you could set up a monitor that goes, if anything turns red here, please alert us, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So fairly standard affair there. Then yeah, if I keep going down, we've got a CPU utilization. Like I said, this is a VM platform, so we are dealing with metrics like CPU memory, disk, that kind of thing. Things you'd see from servers typically. So going down, so we've got the CPU utilization. Again, this sort of says what it is on the tin. So essentially, you've got the way sort of GCE works, so Google Compute Engine works, is obviously you can have varying levels of CPU cores for your different machines. But what this lets you do essentially is sort of bake that all into one graph essentially. So even if you have multiple VMs with different levels of CPU, you can see them all on the same graph, which is quite helpful. Also, additionally, you can set up different sort of alerts and monitoring on this. So like I see, I've got a warning that sort of warns us at 95% or above, which is when you might see sort of performance issues or availability issues if you start going above those levels of utilization. So yeah, just stepping down again, we got the same sort of metrics, but for memory again, like I said, VM platform, we are dealing with sort of RAM level metrics. Again, varying levels. You can have varying levels for different VMs on your platform at the same time, but it gives you a RAM total and then a used RAM. Obviously, with the analytics tool, you could smash those together and look at a utilization, but it can be quite helpful to have those separate as well. And again, if it gets over a certain amount, you could set up an alert on it. If
Sure.
it goes over, if you get close to the top end, you might see some performance issues. And then going down, got network in and network out, essentially egress, ingress. Again, it helps us sort of highlight any peak periods of the day or peak usage periods, especially if it's sort of customer facing applications that you're serving with these VMs. Can really highlight, at what points of the day are you hitting the most sort of levels of traffic. But on the flip side, if it ever just drops off a cliff and goes to zero, you might have a problem because you're not serving any traffic to customer level applications, that kind of thing. So it can be quite helpful to understand that as well. And again, you can set up alerts for the top level, but also the bottom level if you need to, because under a certain amount can be quite helpful to know that. I guess one of the main difference with GCE, so Google Compute Engine, putting against other Google Cloud Platform services like Cloud SQL or Kubernetes, is that you do have you are sort of in charge of your disks in a way. So you do need to have an eye on your disks. One VM can have multiple disks. That's why you can see here we've only got I think 4 VMs, but a whole bunch of disks. So it can be, it's quite important to monitor the status of those. You can have, for example, the VM up and running, but one of the disks that are attached is not not performing correctly, and it can highlight. Again, this is quite a default metric here we've got from Squared Up, so it will highlight if there's any health issues with this with the disk. There's very little, there's no queries to write for this. It's simply you just sort of plug it into Squared Up, and you can bring this up very easily, which is super helpful. It's not something that is that easy to do through the Google sort of default dashboarding, so it is very helpful to have this so easily done in Squared Up, which is quite helpful. And then again, if I scroll down, I've got a few more disk metrics or disk level metrics. So again, we've got sort of total read ops, write ops, like general IOPS metrics, as well as our read and write, which is our max ones. So again, it can be helpful to know. Again, it highlights potentially any peak periods for the application that's running on these VMs. It can really highlight if there's any slowdowns in performance, for example, and you notice it correlates with a time scale on this graph where you've got really high disk usage. That could be the issue. It could also be a signifier that says if you're running any persistent disks at sort of hard disk level with GCE, you can essentially vary that, so you can choose to upgrade to SSDs if you want. So again, this could be a signifier for that. If it's really high all the time, you may want to look to potentially moving to SSDs or something like that.
Just to put you on the spot quickly, one thing that's always missing when you're looking at sort of dashboards, it's the same for AWS and Azure, although I know Azure does have a solution to this. Disk space is always missing, right? Because these metrics are always from the point of view of the platform hosting the VM. They're sort of like outside the VM looking in, right? So the platform knows how much RAM is being consumed. It knows how much it knows how much CPU is being used, but it knows how much disk is provisioned to the VM, but actually how much is written to disk is kind of inside the operating system kind of metric.
Absolutely.
Azure does have a solution to this. They have a log analytics solution that lets you put an agent in the VM. Is there an equivalent in Google Cloud, or would you always need to use another monitoring tool if you wanted those guest level metrics?
No. So yeah, a little bit like AWS, you're right. So it's with GC, it has I call it an ops agent basically. So whenever you have a VM in GCE, as long as you install Google's own ops agent, it's really easy to do. I think it's in the console, just a button essentially, and it will actually go and do it for you. Or you can run a command that they give you in your VMs. But as long as your operating system is supported and it's not something quite niche, so your typical Linux and or Windows deployments, then you can install Google's own agent with the click of a button, and then those metrics can be surfaced in something like Squared Up, even with through just like an API call or something like that, or
Sure.
via an MQL query. So it's certainly possible in this demo environment. I don't think it's there, just because we don't have that ops agent installed just yet on our demo environment, but it's certainly possible within here with one of the I believe it's with one of the Squared Up default metrics. So it's certainly possible.
Nice. Okay. And at the bottom, there's just a little flash there. VM
Yeah.
cost is obviously a big one.
Yeah, just teasing you there. So essentially, it's we've got a cost sort of figure for the last sort of 30 days, and our cost for the last sort of relative 30 days. The way the cost exports work in GCP is that they export your billing account cost. I think it's every day, I believe, and it can sort of go up and down during that time. So that's why we've got a relative 30-day sort of filter here. If you had any less, it wouldn't necessarily work unless you put it into your own data set. But as long as you've got that, it will work. It will give you full sort of historical sort of data as to your costs over the last sort of month or so, as well as you can get a total figure from that. And again, it's quite important. It can really vary with your VM costs. It's one of those things there where if if you double your CPU, you could potentially be doubling your costs, because that is how the cost sort of generally works in GCE. It's all resource based, and it's very sort of scalar like that. So it sort of goes up, according to how much resource you do. So it is quite important. And also, if, with this graph, for example, if it shot up at one point, that's sort of alarm bells ringing, sort of thing. And you can set alerts and monitors on that as well.
Nice. It's probably just worth calling out as well. I mean, again, similar to the other sort of two major cloud platforms, Compute Engine underpins a load of other services like
Yes.
Lightsail and Kubernetes, obviously, and it's the same in the other clouds as well. So even if you aren't thinking like, oh, I'm not specifically provisioning VMs, if you are using Kubernetes, right, a couple of the VMs at the top of that dashboard were actually nodes in one of our Kubernetes node pools.
Absolutely.
So this
Absolutely. Yeah.
dashboard is probably great. So yeah, the plugin setup's pretty easy. Just a service account. It's all written up in the documentation.
Yeah, it's really easy. It's just a service account. Obviously, for the cost data, you'd have to have your BigQuery cost export set up. But for the compute engine, you just need a service account with either overall permissions or specifically compute engine permissions. For the service account to go in and see what it needs to see. But that's all you need. And there's sort of nearly nothing else to it really.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll just go ahead and wrap us up quickly. So yeah, you can find out more about this, about the plugin. You can read up about the plugin. Links to other blogs around GCP from squaredup.com/dashboard gallery. And if you have questions, as always, you can head over to community answers, community.squaredup.com. But yeah, that's it for today. So thank you very much for joining me again, Dan.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Bye.